launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed.
Space Monkeys blasting off with 0xbrainjar. He's the CEO of Composable. You know him well. Had him on the show multiple times here, and they're just getting ready to finally launch the Pablo DEX on the Picasso Network. Brainjar, very nice to meet you in person.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, this is weird for sure, but
yeah. Well, you picked a lovely spot for us, and I'm glad we get to talk here because. Just as usual, there's tons of shit going on.
Absolutely.
Over at Composable. I think most significantly is the Pablo DEX here. What can you tell us about when we can expect to actually be using the DEX and what's going to be happening with the general Picasso launch?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that we needed to solve. So I think when we wanted a DEX to appear onto the Kusama ecosystem, the biggest thing we wanted is liquidity.
Right.
And so we were working on all this EVM connection stuff.
Yeah.
And I think at some point, I realized that the bridging infrastructure that we're building, the trustless bridging infrastructure that we're building between DOT and KSM, allowing parachains to basically talk to each other over IBC, is actually going to come faster than a similar type of technology to connect to EVM.
Okay.
And so from my perspective, now that we have this connection over IBC to bring DOT liquidity into KSM, now we're in a position to actually launch this product with a strong amount of TVL. Because to be honest, to the credit of other teams who have put out other DEXs, I think that's fantastic. But from my perspective, it's super important to me to be able to show the numbers that we have strong numbers of TVL, and and you can only show that if you have EVM liquidity or DOT liquidity. And so I think this is the first time that we're going to see a Kusama product benefit from the sort of value of the DOT token. And so now with this major sort of milestone unlocked, I think now we're in a position to launch Pablo hopefully end of October, early November, pending audits of our grandpa light clients and other pieces associated with the KSM dot bridge. Because we also anticipate other people will use the KSM dot bridge, not just us, so we want to make sure it's as safe as physically possible.
Sure.
On launch, people will participate in an LBP for PICA.
And that's going to be paired against DOT.
Against DOT.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Cool. And then what happens from there? You have your LBP, and then when do people start?
Then from there, people can permissionlessly create new pools. PICA DOT, PICA, KSM.
So no governance for creating a pool?
No, nothing. You just make a pool. It's just like Uniswap.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
As you were saying there, you were super focused on the EVM thing for a while, because that really did seem like the holy grail of liquidity. How much liquidity do you think you can really get from DOT? And where do you go to after that? Because besides the DOT token, there really isn't tons of liquidity floating around the whole Sama ecosystem, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the biggest thing is, having strong TVL numbers, right? 100 million plus is what I want to see personally from a TVL perspective. And if you look at, the amount of TVL locked up in crowd loans for DOT, even our own crowd loan, I think we had 6 million DOTs or something in our crowd loan, and the other parachains had way more, right? So clearly there is DOT to be deployed.
Right.
So I think it's just a matter of having the opportunity available, and hopefully people are can see a DEX that has actual APY and emissions and incentives, and it becomes interesting to someone who's a DOT whale. So from there, I think, the expansion is then to Cosmos. And with Cosmos, it becomes interesting because now we can bring in Atom, we can bring in Osmo, and via Axelar, which is a trusted bridge, so use it as your own risk and don't trust the Axel USDC asset because it is a bridged asset. but now there can be Axel USDC, so then you can have USDC-based pools, USDT-based pools. Then expanding to near, we can have native USDT, which just launched on near, so that's also an interesting pairing. And then also the near asset and anything else people want to bring over from near too.
So on the stablecoin question, we've had a lot of stablecoin pain. Obviously AUSD, the Nomad hack.
Yeah.
On the other side, I mean, also heard that native USDT is going to parallel. How are you guys thinking about stablecoins beyond just the near there?
Yeah, I mean, so native USDT on Polkadot, you still have to get it from Bitfinex, right? So.
Oh, okay.
So basically, like for a chain to offer USDT, they have to basically pay Bitfinex and then they receive USDT, and then you seed the pool and all that. Yeah.
Okay.
So if we wanted to do the same thing, which we might, it's going to have to be like Composable doing that to offer USDT to people. But at some point, right, that USDT is going to run out.
Right.
So it's not, in my mind, it's not really like actual native USDT, because if it was, then you'd be able to just burn USDT on near and print it on another chain.
Right.
But that obviously is like not how this works, right?
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I was thinking like you could just mint it on StateMine or Statement.
No.
Good to know. Okay, fascinating. And then you guys launched this Polkadot to Kusama bridge, which was pretty crazy. You're using IBC.
Yes.
And I know you were waiting, last time we spoke, you were waiting on something from Parity. Beefy.
Yeah, so we decided to look into building a grandpa-like client instead of a beefy-like client.
Right.
And so we just did that instead, because Beefy
never happened?
Beefy has not happened yet, yeah.
What's it like working with Parity? And I mean, we have kind of other, somewhat centralized groups working on Polkadot. We have also the council and the treasury. What's your view of the land here?
I mean, I think that in any major, I mean, we've also worked with informal over in the Cosmos ecosystem. We've worked with Tendermint. We've worked with a whole variety of organizations that are like centralized, that are operating for these interoperable ecosystems. And I think, end of the day, these organizations will just move slower than a startup team.
Right.
I think where things can become frustrating is if you contribute to the advancement of something and that centralized authority just basically says, oh yeah, like, thank you very much, we'll take a look at it later, which kind of happened with the way we were approaching Beefy.
Right.
In the Cosmos ecosystem, these guys were like, yeah, sure, like, no problem, like, let's just make the changes, upstream these things. So we had a very different experience. But I think, now I think people are like learning within Parity that they have to actually listen to the outside a bit and like understand what people want. And I think people have mentioned Beefy since 2021, at least I was. I think things are trending in a positive direction with Parity as far as getting key things moving. But these things will always be slow. So.
Are you satisfied with the grandpa
like client?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, I think Beefy like client verification would be cheaper for sure.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, grandpa like client is still functional, still works. Not crazy more expensive than Beefy, but we know that we're gonna have to deprecate the grandpa like client at some point to have Beefy.
To go to Beefy.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. You guys are pretty close to the guys at Cosmos. Also near you are. What do you think these ecosystems outside of .sama, how do you think they're seeing Polkadot and Kusama and everything right now?
I think there's just a bit of confusion. It's like a lot of things fell into place for Polkadot before a lot of these other groups, a lot of these other ecosystems.
Yeah.
And I think they're just confused like what's actually happening now, right? Like,
okay.
We got a whole network live, 2 networks live, functional parachains, XCVM, relay chain security, and sort of just like all of a sudden like the narrative kind of just stopped happening.
Right.
And I think, I've been saying this for a long time, like, Substrate is a difficult framework to work with, but working with the Cosmos SDK is also hard too. But for some reason, like, people who are more experienced in creating interesting financial derivatives, etc., have always just gravitated to Cosmos or Near or other ecosystems. And I think truly the reason why is because I don't think parachains really do fit the app chain thesis, which is kind of controversial.
Okay, tell me what you mean.
Basically, like...
What's the app chain thesis?
So the app chain thesis is that every app should have a chain, a sovereign chain.
Right.
And, like, in both of these interoperable ecosystems, you see people spinning up entire chains for a DEX, or for a lending protocol, or for an Oracle, or for a Perpetuals protocol. And that's all fun and good, but I really think that the space that Polkadot needs to operate in, because the tech has been always so much more like well-defined and gigabrain, that it's almost been difficult for people to like actually understand what's going on sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that the niche that Polkadot should fill is this development between the blocks or between the chains, basically. So I think the days of people spinning up not very novel parachains has proven to be behind us, and I think the future is going to be people building applications that tap into other applications, including applications in other ecosystems. And I think also, by the way, Cosmos suffers from the same problem. I think Cosmos, like, they never had their tokenomics figured out, and Atom 2.0 supposedly will solve this.
Right.
And so I think that's why we see some renewed interest in Cosmos. But people build very sophisticated trading derivatives protocols on Cosmos because they just like have complete flexibility to build a chain, and they're not anchored to the relay chain, which also prevents some like scalability things. If you want a super fast chain, you need to have those things as a completely separate chain outside of the relay chain.
Right.
So I believe is maybe with this architecture that Polkadot has, that perhaps things are more suited for building applications that span multiple ecosystems and multiple chains. And this is also why, we're doing what we're doing with XCVM and everything, and why we are a parachain is because I think that Polkadot is designed for this thesis.
So your parachains, and with the power of XCVM, the idea is that an application could touch XCVM and through it reach multiple other avenues, like even outside the Polkadot ecosystem.
That's
is that right?
Yeah, so you can have an application that's composed of Osmosis and Mangata and Oak Network and Pablo DEX and Akala and whatever, all underneath the same hood, which is a mind trip, right?
Right.
But this is what we need, because at some point in the innovation cycle, how many new derivatives protocols are you going to create? How many more DEXs are we going to make? How many? It's like these things don't matter at this point.
Right.
Like, let's actually build real innovation that composes what we already have. It's basically like people saying, let's make the same YouTube. Let's make the same Gmail. It's like, bro, like the winners in this race have already been decided. Give up and build something that's actually like building on top of your ancestors. And I think that's the problem, is like maybe Polkadot has been a bit too like short-sighted, where they believe that what we're doing is the most important thing. We don't need to pay attention to other ecosystems. I don't think that's necessarily the truth. I think people do pay attention to what's happening, but like from my mind, if I was to build an application within the Substrate ecosystem, we would make it custom to the ecosystem. We wouldn't make it a copy-pasta situation, which is also why I don't understand the idea of having an EVM parachain, which is a bit controversial, right? But I've also never understood that, because it's like...
But even with the onboarding narrative, we're going to get people to copy their app
Yeah,
on Polkadot? And
I mean, I think it's nice from a go-to-market perspective, but I think for a long-term perspective, it's like I don't know how much more copy pasta one like entire industry can endure. Right?
okay. Well, what are you thinking about Wasm these days?
Yeah, I think Wasm's. I mean, we have Cosm Wasm on our
Yeah,
chain, right?
yeah,
So
right.
I think Wasm-based smart contracting frameworks makes a lot of sense.
Is it picking up on Cosmos? Like, is it a
Yeah,
popular thing to build with? Really?
Yeah, Cosm Wasm is very popular. Yeah.
Okay. So who do you think is doing it right in the Polkadot space? Like, what teams are getting it?
I think from a interesting use of substrate perspective, it's Invarch and Oak Network. They're
Yeah.
doing interesting things with substrate. Like for the first time, I've never seen any other team use substrate in an interesting way.
Right.
Yeah, maybe like they've optimized, they've rewritten a application into a palette, which makes things faster than if you were to run a smart contract. Okay, cool. That's completely fine. But those guys are actually building like unique applications because of what substrate can do. And
Right.
this is what I was talking about probably the first time I spoke to you on your show, which was like, this will take some time. And how long has it taken, right? Like, I don't know, a year basically to get to this point where you see this type of innovation. But yeah, I think we have a long way to go. I think like, to be honest, there's a lot to blame external capital providers for sinking a lot of capital into ideas very early on in the Polkadot ecosystem, and now after so many different alt L1 narratives, I think people are just jaded, really.
Sure. Well, on that idea of like huge ideas and long way to go, it's been a long road here as well. I mean, you guys are only just starting. You guys are only now approaching the point where you're going to really launch on the Picasso Network.
Yep.
What can you tell us about the challenges that you faced on this road here? Maybe things you've learned that have changed your perspective. What's that been like for you?
Like, first of all, was this topic of bridging, right? I think I've quickly realized that trustless bridges are the only way to go. This started all the way back in December of last year when we started thinking about IBC, bridge to Cosmos. But then we started thinking, why can't we make this to all ecosystems, right? And so I think I learned a lot about team composition because I have a bunch of delusional ideas like that. And it's important to have the team around you that can pick that up and like take it, right? And take that forward. I feel as though Polkadot suffers a little bit from people thinking too small.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's really because either A, they don't have the team composition necessary,
Okay.
or B, they're scared because, you know, I also think this crowd loan situation also puts a lot of pressure on teams to ship a token.
Yeah.
And to like deliver a network quickly, but also like you have to hit the key milestones, you know, for your backers to be like, okay, you're a viable project. Because if you don't have a Polkadot or a Kusama parachain slot, you know, you won't raise venture funding as a Polkadot project. That's the truth.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting point.
I think teams haven't really built up this like real proper team composition to take these risks that I'm mentioning, because they also feel pressure from having to deliver something to their crowd loan participants, which, let's be honest, they're just going to dump the hell out of the token when the thing launches anyway.
Yeah.
So I think there's essentially like, I don't know, fear of failure.
Fear of failure
is pretty deep, I think, within the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem. And honestly, it was a major reason why some of our like components that we deprecated, pieces like the trusted setup of Mosaic, we didn't decide to deprecate them because we were hearing when PICA nonstop all day long until I went to sleep every single day. So, I mean, now we're coming out with like a bridge to DOT, which is the first time that's ever happening, and we could have just, you know, pivoted and done that a while ago, but because one thinks, you know, seemed appealing to the community, we sort of went with that decision, and then now we've taken a new, different approach, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's like, even though we're trying to cultivate this culture of experimentation, crowd loaners are ruthless. And I think the reality is like this has to change, or else nothing will be built in this ecosystem that is worthy of someone from another ecosystem saying, "Oh, this is actually really cool." It's like, no, bro, like this is all complete garbage.
Totally, yeah. Well, that crowd loan narrative was pretty hot and probably the best marketing Polkadot's ever had, and it was also extremely disappointing for
Everybody.
for pretty much everybody, right?
Both the projects and the people too, right?
Right, yeah.
Except for Moon River, basically, like
Yeah, those relationships, that relationship between crowd loaners and the projects was built on a lot of lies.
yes,
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so I mean, you guys have been pushing your timeline back a lot. Also, like, you've been depreciating a few other projects, some other projects. You've lost some other projects. I think you guys are still working with Instrumental.
Yes, we are.
Okay,
Yeah.
and just to recap on Instrumental, that's like being able to do DeFi on different chains.
Basically cross-chain vault strategies. So with
Right.
Instrumental, what they're basically working on is when these, when DOT is out, right?
Yeah.
Being able to bridge ST DOT over and STKSM over, and be able to have an STKSM ST DOT pool. And you put a vault strategy in front of that, and you basically just have, a direct KSM investment, and that's the underlying strategy, right?
Right.
So it's like really trying to bring Yearn finance into this cross-chain narrative.
Gotcha.
So Instrumental is running along perfectly with like now incorporating components of XCVM as well. But vault strategies are very hard to build because I don't know if anyone knows this, but vault strategies, like when Yearn pioneered vault strategies, their architecture was like contract, then a proxy, and then like 4 contracts across multiple different strategies. It's a complex thing, and then having to decentralize a keeper to rebalance these things.
Right.
Strategies are not just like set it and forget it and like pray to like God that it's just gonna work out. Like that doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing goes for the Angular team as well. So
Angular's still on.
Angular is also proceeding as well, and building a lending market is the easiest way to wreck an entire ecosystem, right? Because if you build it the wrong way, then just blow up the whole ecosystem, right? So like better to like have, we have liquidation interfaces now for bots to call, which, some other protocols in the ecosystem could have benefited from bots. We had to help Angular build bots to do liquidations.
Right.
Like isolated pool lending in a pallet is difficult because you basically have to create sub vaults for each pair, essentially. So that was really hard too. And then like trying to do all of this in a way where each pool is fully isolated, and you doing borrowing and lending here doesn't affect over here in a pallet where these things are like shared. This is hard. So these things just are hard, and they just take a lot of time.
You're still confident you can do it, though?
I mean, we're working very closely with the team, and when it's time for their time to proceed to launch, again, it's a very important piece of our ecosystem.
Yeah.
When they're ready to proceed to launch, we're there to assist them and help them ship the product out. It's a pallet, so we have to oversee everything. We'll run an audit on it. It's actually already went through an audit, but we'll audit it ourselves. We'll do QA on it. We'll make sure everything works, and then we can add it to the runtime of the chain.
Gotcha.
Because it is a pallet, we have to take that extra care. So both these two things are progressing.
So there are other ones going on. I mean, Arturo, was that ever officially part of the project or no? Okay,
no.
You guys are just like admired them.
We gave them a grant.
Oh,
that was
okay,
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about Bribe? What happened with Bribe? Because that was a super exciting idea.
Yeah.
That was a way to put yourself into other other protocols that you wanted to work with. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, we loosely use this term incubate, which basically is just protocol design. So we went in, we architected a palette for the Bribe team, Bribe team spun out, pursued their own funding. They didn't spin out from us. They spun out from Advanced Blockchain. So
Oh, right.
we never had any compensation related agreements or anything like that with Bribe Protocol in
Right.
any way, and we didn't receive any, like, for us, the Composable Labs incubations has always been about driving traffic to the chain,
Right.
not actually compensating from any of the projects, basically.
Okay.
So that's the vision of Composable Labs. And for Bribe, at some point, I think the founder just, like, probably around February or so, I just stopped hearing from the founder, basically.
You haven't
And-
heard from him still?
No, still to this day, no. So I think he just wanted to take the vision a separate way, probably.
Is he still alive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
Bribe just released a statement a few weeks ago that they wound down the project. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, he's doing something, right?
Right.
I don't think it's I gave him the idea and he ran with it. He shipped an MVP on Ethereum mainnet. Then he shipped something on Polygon, I'm pretty sure. And then at some point, the connection I think he just probably wanted to take things a different way. And then, yeah.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the year, the story of Composable Finance, as you were working on launching Picasso, was like, it was just more and more ideas, like another project, all coming from labs. Bribe was exciting. Are you guys refocusing now? Are you guys trying to kind of consolidate a vision, or
Yeah.
what's going on there? And what is labs? What's the role of labs in the future?
Seeing how the Bribe situation became misconstrued as a problem for us to deal with in the public.
Right, because I always thought Bribe was like you guys were
Running
building
it.
Bribe. Yeah.
No, that's not the case at all. And we had no control over the future of the project. And when they decided to wind it down, we had no say at all in that. That entire process happened behind closed doors, and I was not a part of that process at all.
Okay.
So, and neither was anybody in Composable Finance. So I think we want people to build on our technology, and we want to support that technology in the form of grants.
Okay.
And I think where we go in and try to push things along by helping people, not only creates like an illusion of Composable Finance and Brainjar running a project, which is harmful and because it creates more liability for us ultimately.
Right, it does.
Or, we're also not letting them breathe, right? And I think, from my perspective, I want Composable Labs to focus exclusively on identifying promising teams, giving them grants, pushing them along as much as they feel comfortable with, and having them build between the chains, as I was saying. So, yeah, that's really the focus of Composable Labs. I think this idea of us continuing to incubate projects internally, maybe it's something we revisit in the future, but I mean, I think that it's hard to talk about XCVM and IBC and a sort of cohesive stack of Web3, and then also have people ask me questions about Angular and Instrumental and all these other like ancillary DeFi primitives, and I'm not doing DeFi, right? I'm doing interoperability work, and that's what I want to do. I want to build the infrastructure. And so I think the people who come in and build the applications, I'm going to let them craft their own narratives, figure out why they're doing those things in DeFi and why they're architecting things the way they want to. But from my perspective, it's like there's only so much that me as one person can do, and I think the problems we're tackling are much bigger than just DeFi.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's limits to how much you can take care of and how much you can handle a single narrative.
I mean, I think for me, it's just like, like we support, like, don't get me wrong, we're supporting Instrumental and Angular as much as we can, as much as the team wants us to.
Sure.
But from my perspective, I think it's like, we can't go and disrupt the existing narrative of cross-chain with people like Layer 0 and Axelar and telling people that XCVM allows you to compose applications when then, I have to go and talk about our brand new lending protocol, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
That should be like a brand new team that's like their sole focus is on this concept.
Right. They use XCVM, but they don't have to be from Composable.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my philosophy. I think.
Okay.
I think you know, the reposition is strong because, you know, with less sort of hands-on efforts, we have more time to provide sort of value to these grant recipients.
Okay, rad. Now, I thought maybe like just last question to close out here. What's exciting you, your mind lately? I mean, what's like another great Brainjar story of something that we can expect in the future? Maybe, you know, a year or two down the line, but what's in your vision yet that we haven't heard about?
So I think there's like two really interesting things that we've been thinking about. First is ETH2, so bridging to ETH2.
Is it going to be possible to do it trustlessly?
Yes.
Okay.
We've been investigating it. It is possible, but it's going to take some time to figure out. This is hard stuff. Like,
yeah.
It's not just normal stuff. Like, we have a team of cryptographers now, if that gives you any hints as to what tech we're using. We're also building a scaling solution for parachains themselves as well, which also uses cryptography.
What do you mean a scaling solution?
Basically, like trying to process transactions on a parachain much faster than ever before.
Damn. Okay.
So yeah, so these two things, I don't want to say a single thing about either of them because they're under research.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm not going to commit to anything. I don't want to see any Discord messages, please.
Yeah. Oh, you just tell such great stories, man. You get people excited.
Yeah.
Pianist is here. Really nice meeting you. Really nice talking to you today.
Yeah.
I'm really excited that we'll finally get to start using something on Picasso. Going to be worth the wait.
Yeah. No, for sure. I'm just very much so excited about seeing IBC in the parachain ecosystem. Seeing DOT on Kusama, it's crazy. I think we could even really rival some other DEXs, not only in the parachain ecosystem, but outside too. So when I say I'm not a DeFi specialist, I am. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Cool, man. All right, dude. Well, I hope we get to meet up soon.
Yeah.
And yeah, just so excited to see what happens with you guys. And thanks so much. I know you take a lot of shit, and it's been a wild journey. I'm sure it's been a huge growth journey for you personally.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely. And I thank you for really allowing me to come every single time and just put it all out there. So
yeah, we like to hear what you have to say, man.
Appreciate it.
All right, Asynchronous Brainjar. Nice to meet you, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, great to see you.
You too.